I come from an era where there was money for investigative journalism, and where we didn't look at symptoms. If there was a problem, if there was flooding in Bangladesh, it should be reported that it was caused by the cutting of trees in the Himalayas, so that you can do something about it, and not just look at film people drowning. That's not journalism. That's just sensationalism. And I know it makes money, but it's not on. And we need more independent media and people who dare to stick their neck out and tell the truth about what's happening, and not be afraid.
I'm here today with Renée Scheltema, the director of the important film Normal is Over.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, the film is called Normal is Over. You can watch it on the website normalisover.org. Climate change is bad. And it doesn't surprise me that only now some people are starting to acknowledge that it's happening. And that's just because it's at their doorstep and they can see it out their window. I wanted to make Normal is Over. I went to the commissioning editor and asked if we could co-produce this film. And this person said, Renée, you want to make a film about everything that is impossible? And then he said, good luck. And so I decided to go it alone as a one-woman crew. And I rented out my house, and I borrowed money, and I filmed, and I made this film as a one-woman crew. I did the sound, the camera, the production, the research, everything, and shot 200 hours during 1 year of filming. And then I spent 5 years editing it, and I called it Normal is Over in 2015. My youngest daughter helped me during the editing. She transcribed all the interviews. She made all the animations. She insisted that she'd help me make this film because she said, Mom, this is an important message. And then unfortunately what happened is that 2 days after the film was completed, she passed away in a car crash. So I have not really been able to get the word out about this film because of that.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when I thought of young people when you started to speak, because I thought the story of how you just struck out on your own could be an inspiration for young people. That, you know, that the one can have this vision and go for it and do it, and just as you did. And then, of course, the great sadness of losing a child. Yeah. Yeah.
But I know that she would still want me to continue, because Normal is still over.
Of course.
When I was 19, I saw this report from the Club of Rome, which is a group of European scientists who worked out the future of the planet with MIT technology. And they actually said that, you know, with the growing population and declining resources and continuing economic growth and continuing pollution, at some point in time, just before the year 2000, we would be in a crisis, and that prediction has come true. I really made the film for the friends of my millennial children, because I could see they all knew something was wrong, but they didn't know exactly what was wrong. And if you try and find proper information these days, it's very hard, because you have social media, which is not really a part of an investigative journalism section, and the mass media are also really giving us a lot of amusement. Plus, the media are owned by only a handful of people. I would like to state that climate change and species extinction and wealth inequality and resource depletion and also COVID are all symptoms of a dysfunctional financial economic system that is no longer working for us. It hasn't been working for us for quite a while. The real the change needs to come from all of us and from a collective force and from each and every individual, and not just, it's really not just about climate change. If there are no more bees, we will no longer be able to eat fruit and plant, and there will be no more birds being able to eat insects. 80% of all insects have already died out in Europe. It's very, very scary. And I find, the loss of biodiversity almost more scary than climate change. And then this economic system creates wealth inequality. There's now one guy who owns as much wealth as the rest of the world, and he chooses to spend it to fly to the universe and stay in space for 5 minutes instead of feeding the poor in Africa,
Jeff,
or doing anything.
Talking about Jeff
Bezos,
right? Jeff Bezos.
Well, for instance,
just wanted to say his name so we can put a picture of him on. Yes, and when you talk about the loss of biodiversity, there's also the loss of habitat that's happening. I mean, we've actually, I think something like more than 90% of the rainforests have been converted to the use of cattle and other agricultural animals.
It's very scary. What Bolsonaro, if you want to name names,
let's name names, right?
Who's the president of Brazil, who really thinks that a dead forest is worth more than a live forest. And if the Amazon, the lungs of the planet, and we are close to a tipping point, it's really scary. If he keeps on cutting the Amazon and killing the indigenous people who really have always lived in harmony with nature and can be our guides. If he keeps doing this for, I think we'll have only a few more years, and the Amazon will be changed in a desert, and the consequences of that will be devastating for all of us, not just humanity, because we tend to really think very anthropocentric. It's all about us.
The Amazon is like the lungs of the planet. It really is the place where our oxygen is. The Amazon and the oceans, almost all of our oxygen, I think a majority of our oxygen is produced in the oceans. And of course, the ocean situation is irreversible at this point, the acidification.
We destroyed and we killed the coral, and we emptied the ocean with searching for the last fish. I think it's very important to understand that all these separate problems are linked to our economic system, which is turning the last of free nature into a business opportunity. And that is really the essence of our problem. And we really need to change to a steady state economy or ecological economy or circular economy. And of course, we also need to do permaculture and regenerate the planet and do a lot of other things. But the root cause of all these diverse problems is our economic system, where we want forever more money, and we cannot eat money, we cannot breathe money. We're being very dumb.
We are being very dumb, and I was very moved in watching your film by the way, the clarity with which you made that case for how we are actually just mortgaging the very last of the resources of our planet, and indigenous peoples are being pushed off their lands, and everything is further and further and further till there will be nothing left. And that is the basis of our economic system, of money that is loaned and has to be paid back. And these nations are all in debt. They have to keep selling what they have left to pay back the interest.
Yes.
Was that fairly accurate for what you have?
So everybody wants money. So poor African people go to cities, and everywhere in the world they go to cities for money instead of staying on the land where they've been self-sufficient. And then countries are, they want to borrow money because everybody wants money. So they borrow money from the rich, from the West or from China. And then they can't pay back the debt because of the interest. And then the West or China, for instance, who was really colonizing Africa, but also the Eastern Europe, will say, okay, well, you don't have to pay, and we understand you can't pay back the money, but we will take your resources. And they do it in a clever way. They build railways to the resources. A lot of people just boast about the railways, but it's really, the railways really go to have a stop, and the stop is in the middle of the jungle where they can get the last of the resources, and then the harbor is being upgraded so that they can get the last of the resources to their country and feed their population and have economic growth, just like we used to have economic growth.
And when the resources when the resources are used up, they are left with a poisoned environment where the resources were, where they're left with bad water in their lakes, no fishing, no opportunity to live there for their children, to live the life they were promised, that materialistic life they thought they were getting. Yes, scary.
Yeah. So that is the sad part of the story. And then I really wanted to focus on solutions as to what can we do? What can we do about this? Because you can protest, which is important and needs to be done. And I think we need more protests and louder protests.
In your film, you did pinpoint some individuals who are doing some of these steps towards solutions. The woman in India, Vandana Shiva, I think is her name. Amazing what she is doing, saving seeds and planting and growing organic food in that country. And who else? Who else would you like to tell us about?
Well, Vandana Shiva is really a strong woman, and she makes a strong point against industrial agriculture, because the big companies are taking over the land of the small farmers, and then they poison it with glyphosate or neonicotinoids to creating monocultures of soyabeans, and taking away the livelihood of farmers, and poisoning the planet and the soil. Well, the problem is that these big companies then sue the small farmers as the wind blows their GMO seeds onto their farm, and then they sue them and say that they've stolen their seeds. Meanwhile, these were the seeds from people in India in the first place. And how can you say this seed belongs to me? I mean, the whole idea of property is already insane. But I did see something.
Not only if it blows on your land, but if you reuse, if you try to save seed and reuse, same thing.
Yeah. But I did see some article not so long ago that some people have managed to stop Monsanto, which is taken over by Bayer, selling glyphosate to the United States. It's only a tiny article. It should be a frontline page. But I saw a small article, and I think that's great. And now it should also be
that some people were suing. I saw that too, that some people were suing a couple, and they looked like the couple from the American Gothic painting. I don't know, that was just my impression, of farmers, a man and a woman, and they are suing Monsanto, which now is Bayer, for the cancers that were caused in them by their products. Someone in the government right now is working to produce a bill to apply the right to repair to products. In other words, products that are made now sealed so that no one can get in there to change or fix anything, and computerized, which everything, to change that law so that we can repair. We used to repair our cars. We used to repair our things. I did.
But it's also weird that in America you have a law that you cannot repair stuff.
We've been aware of that for years, planned obsolescence, but it's getting so far out of hand now.
But the corporations need to take back every product that breaks down and recycle the materials, and then rent it back to us so that they are responsible for the materials and not us. That is just one of the simple solutions that can be made, and which these things are happening, but at a slow pace. It should happen much faster. But instead of throwing away your whole car or throwing away a mixer, give it back to the corporation where you bought it, and they are responsible for recycling. And then, if they will change their business models quickly if we don't stop polluting yesterday. Yeah.
And stop using plastics and stop consuming and so many things, stop eating meat. stop having so many children. Yeah.
Well, you know, the population is really, overconsumption is really the problem. 40% of all the food in the West, and I'm talking about America and Europe, is being thrown away. We're really living in a waste culture. We in the West are creating most of the pollution and the loss of biodiversity. We're responsible for all of this, and the poor countries are having are they actually the victims of our lifestyle, and that really needs to change. We're the ones who need to change first. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course they all think that they want to have our lifestyle, and that is, you know, that is partly
understandable.
Yes,
but it's just
but it's also that what we're putting out there in terms of our media and so on makes our lifestyle look glamorous, and in some ways, of course, it is. We're not worrying about going hungry. We're not worrying about in the moment. So it looks to them maybe, but it's the lifestyle of consumerism, of having stuff, of having more and more stuff. It's not something we want to spread. It's not something we want to make look ideal.
Yeah, so the United States and Europe have to take the first steps.
Yeah, absolutely, we do.
In changing this, changing the course of this massive earthship.
I would like to hear a little bit more what you have to say about the loss of biodiversity and what is happening in this planet. With we mentioned already so much of the land going to cattle raising, and also going to the rape of resources, tearing down forests.
The regeneration of this planet, and we need to protect. There's also another group, which I think it's called Protect Half, and they are striving to protect half of the oceans, so that no fishing trawlers can go there, because we really need to protect the oceans. The oceans are overfished and the coral reefs are dying out, and it is all accelerating, and we really need to stop in our tracks, and we need to stop. The whole idea that we can fly to Bali to have a week of yoga lessons is outrageous. Speak to a poor person in Africa and he will stare at you. He doesn't even know what you're talking about. What are you doing? And so so the regeneration of this planet is, I think, even more important. And then we have different kind of money systems that are starting to pop up. And I'm not talking about Bitcoin, because with Bitcoin is really there, I think, for speculative reasons, and it's not really doing any good to the planet. On the contrary, it's using a lot of energy, mining these currencies, and it's no good. But there are people who have created complementary currencies that were next to the normal money system, where we can use different kind of money to stimulate people to protect the planet, and it's happening in many, on small scale. That is a very important solution as well. Yeah. And it can have very many different forms. We can have an ecosystem of complementary currencies, because we don't need, in our current money system, it's all about competition and getting more and more money. But we do not need competition in healthcare. We do not need competition in environmental activism. We do not
education
need
of children. Yeah. Education of children. We don't. It's
No. So we can use a different method of exchange. We do need competition. So our current system, with its competitive nature, it would be good for finding maybe better batteries that can be recycled instead of sourced in the Congo until there's really nothing left to sell and the whole of the Congo is gone. We should be able to recycle batteries and reuse them and make them in a much more clever way, because batteries have been a bottleneck for solar energy and for many wind energy, for many different things. and we're not yet there. We still throw away lots of batteries full of lithium and cobalt and all the other minerals that are worth a lot of money and that have been mined at the we're using Africans as slaves basically. So we could really use better batteries and use competition in that sense. Yeah,
that's where some of the technological development energy could be going. Yes, right.
Yeah,
to develop,
but we cannot
and some of it is, and some of it is.
Yeah, but we cannot solve all these problems in a technological way. We have all the technology to solve all the problems in this world. We've had it for a long time, but it's really how we use it. And we first have to become aware of the gravity of our situation. And I'm afraid that we have to feel it, and that our feet have to get wet, and that we have to suddenly, we can't buy fruit anymore. Then we get, maybe we shouldn't have killed all the insects, but then it's too late. And humanity is not very good in behavior for the future. And even though American Indians and indigenous people have been able to think 7 generations ahead, our current society is such a quick fix society where we fix everything with pills. And I won't go into COVID, but it's part of our attitude towards life at the moment is so built around quick fixes and instead of thinking long term and seeing what the effects are for our grandchildren and their grandchildren.
It feels like this is a change that we want to make right now, that we want the world to open to this, and maybe it is a moment that is happening.
Yeah, so we have to first wake up, and I hope a lot of people can watch the film. And some people say, why don't you make it for free? And I would like to, but I've made it from my last of my resources.
Well, for those who have Amazon Prime, it is free on Amazon Prime.
Is it free on Amazon Prime? Oh,
I think,
okay.
Oh, no, maybe it was $2.99.
I set up a foundation. It's called the New Normal Foundation. It was a very original name just before COVID. Just like normal is over was quite an original name just before COVID. And now the word normal is over has been abused constantly, as if,
Well, as if people are waking up to the fact that normal is over. So you were ahead of the wave, but you were right on the pulse of what is happening. And that is a good thing.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I would have, it would have been better if people had woken up earlier, because this is not something new. Climate change has been on the map for at least 30 years. And the idea that our financial economic system is dysfunctional has been on the map for at least 50 years, if not longer. But
I think the effects of humanity's thing have been felt since the beginning of industrialization back in the 16th century. People, we were having an effect on things as machines started to be produced. So yes, those effects, and certainly the knowledge of it has been around for our lifetimes, yours and mine.
Yeah. And there's this saying from Mahatma Gandhi, I just wrote it down. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Now I just hope that is the case just in time and not too late, because then I would not consider it a win.
Because if you win and if I win, that means the planet wins. If you win and this recognition is spread, it means we all win.
Well, yeah, we need to really change, and that this is something. It's also in the film. I asked Ian McCallum, who is a psychiatrist and an environmentalist, how can we heal the planet? And then he laughs and he says, "We can't heal the planet. We need to heal ourselves. We need to, and healing is not something that is done in a quick fix with popping a pill. It's a process, and so this process of understanding the problems that we are facing, this awakening is not happening overnight. We have to have patience and just keep going and keep telling people that the way forward is not competition, and is not making more money, and is not trying to get into space before the other one. That we really need to understand that if we are to survive as a species, we need to take care of our home, and that's our planet. And now,
those are very good words for all of us. And is there any other, I mean, you kind of summed it all up right there, but is there any last thing you'd like to communicate to people who are here? One thing is, watch Normal is Over.
We can have circular systems for everything, for our food system and for our products and for everything we do. That is really one of the ways of dealing with this. Yeah. And stop being materialistic, because it's more stuff is not going to make us happy. And
it is about changing your life, becoming aware, realizing that every moment, every choice you make is important to all of us.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's about really an attitude change first of all, and then from there find. Well, I've screened the film throughout the world for until COVID. I discovered while I showed the film in all these different places that it was very fun to meet like-minded people and concerned people. But I also screened it like in Illinois or in places where there are right-wing monoculture, right-wing people and surrounded by monocultures of pesticides. And these people couldn't handle the film. They would walk out, they would start talking, look at their phone. And that made me realize that it's not for me to try and change the mind of those elderly men who think that everything is fine, that there's no climate change. Come back to the media. The media are owned by a handful of people. I don't think Jeff Bezos, who is now just bought the Washington Post, is going to be very critical about people buying stuff online. more stuff and then throwing it out.
Actually, yeah, he has remained, so he bought it a few years ago, and he has remained a little bit distant from the editorial policy of the paper, but that could change at any point. When you talked about that, the showing the films for who are not on that page at all, it reminded me of what's happening in so much of the world right now, in Europe and America, this incredible split that's happening, where people are either awake to what's going on or they don't want to hear about it. And it's happening on the political spectrum, it's happening in so many ways.
I have so many ideas of solutions as the world has changed because of COVID, but there's still, living in South Africa, the moment we had the first lockdown, I could see poor people ending up on the street every day. More and more people started to live under that one bridge and then under the other bridge and setting up their tents, and they'll have hardly have income in it. They live for, from the informal economy, and then suddenly people thought that everything you touched had COVID, so they didn't give them cash anymore, and it's just heartbreaking to see how the poor people in and I'm just talking about South Africa are suffering from this COVID crisis, which again is treated by the media as something really bad and we all die from, even though 99.9% of all people recover. But we're not talking about all the people that have died of poverty, which is millions of people have died of poverty. And TB, and so we really need to put things in context and focus on on the real problems and the cause of the problems. Because if you just focus on the symptoms, especially the media, I keep on being cross. I mean, I've been part of the media, and I come from an era where there was money for investigative journalism, and where we didn't look at symptoms. If there was a problem, if there was flooding in Bangladesh, it should be reported that it was caused by the cutting of trees in the Himalayas, so that you can do something about it, and not just look at film people drowning. That's not journalism. That's just sensationalism. And I know it makes money, but it's not on. And we need more independent media and people who dare to stick their neck out and tell the truth about what's happening, and not be afraid. Because these days it's starting to become scary to be a journalist and open your mouth.
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And for journalists, you know, all the major newspapers in the United States are laying people off. Their staffs have been massively cut. It's not easy to begin for a young person. I'm thinking of young people today to dedicate their lives to this, and yet that's what we need.
But then again, there are so many. There's a few people who are so insanely rich. Some of them, if just one of them was awake and would support investigative journalism, or investigative journalists, so that the truth can come out and the picture can become clear, because it's a very clear picture as to what we're doing to this planet. It's very clear why we are busy destroying the planet and ourselves. And it's very clear that there are solutions that we can implement now. And it doesn't have to be technology, because I've noticed that especially rich people love technological solutions. It doesn't have to be a technological solution. Yes, it can be money for plants and for indigenous plants and for regeneration of the planet. There's lots of ways of getting voices out that need to be heard, instead of Netflix and Comcast and AT&T and Disney owning all the media, because there's 6 corporations that own the media in the United States, which is Comcast and Disney and AT&T and I forgot the others, and they are entertainment companies. And what we are doing in the West is we are amusing ourselves to death. Just sitting behind a TV, watching stupid sensation news or watching movies that distract us from the truth. And there's this niche, there's this important space for investigative journalism and for investigative journalists to bring out awesome documentaries that can inspire us to make this change. Because if a documentary is seen by millions of people, it will have a large effect. Sorry.
And I wanted I wanted to ask you though, if you have any other films that you would recommend. I mean, I saw recently Endgame 2050. There are a number of other people who are doing what you are doing. And are there any of these? You mentioned Seaspiracy. And are there other films that you would like to recommend and bring to our attention as well?
Well, I've really, when I made Normal is Over, I've really tried to not watch other films so that I could stay original and not inadvertently copy any other filmmakers. So I haven't watched any other films for a while, actually. I just happened to watch Seaspiracy, and I know it's bad, but everybody needs to see that film too. Yeah,
it's very powerful. And I know there was a film with Woody Harrelson about soil, regeneration of soil, which I thought was powerful. And I'm not remembering the name of it, but maybe we can put it on the screen. If we come up with that. So many good films. And yours was, for me, one of the most powerful. That's why I reached out to you.
Thank you. Yeah, but I think it's because I tie all these problems together and show that they're linked towards our dysfunctional economic system.
As you you and a number of your guest speakers pointed out in the film, that it is based on money making money. It's based on interest, money making money, and that just spreads out until there's nothing left. you know.
Well, yes, if you want to start a business, and you want to borrow money from the bank, you have to pay back more than you receive. And that's just, and where's that extra money going to come from? So there's never enough money to go around. So everyone is in debt, and whole countries are in debt. And then they sell themselves out and sell the last of the resources. So the poor countries have nothing left to sell. And it's not okay.
No.
And yeah, it needs to stop, and we need to recycle everything and stop digging and recycle all the materials that we've taken out. Upcycle them.
Upcycle, yes. Thank you, Renée. Thank you for all your time.